Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Swasth Wellbeing, would like to welcome you all to our today's session on pharmacovigilance for patient safety by Ms. Arshia Bhandari. So, Arshia Bhandari is an independent pharmacovigilance consultant and founder of PHV Fit, an organization that works towards bringing holistic awareness regarding patient safety principles and pharmacovigilance through open dialogues in different forums. The aim of the organization PHV Fit is to foster patient safety leadership in our country to strengthen the patient safety culture in healthcare. Arshia, who has been in the field of pharmacovigilance drug safety for last 16 years and has worked with blue chip pharma companies on end-to-end pharmacovigilance process during her journey with Quantum Solutions India and Parexel International. She has extensive experience in operational management, client coordination, training, and mentoring in the domain of pharmacovigilance. She has also delivered talks on pharmacovigilance at AIIMS New Delhi and Chitkara University, Chandigarh. Arshia is also a certified business storyteller and coaches NGOs on storytelling for impact. She believes in the tremendous power of stories and writes profitably on LinkedIn to spread awareness about patient safety principles and pharmacovigilance. Articles on patient safety efforts in India and diagnosing through the pharmacovigilance lens were recently published in Uppsala Reports, a WHO publication, and talked about the patient safety initiatives in India and the way forward. The first step to social change is awareness and the problem. PHFIT is an initiative to bring positive transformation in our healthcare system by empowering patients and healthcare workers through understanding of the patient safety principles and challenges. So firstly, heartiest welcome, Arshia, and we feel fortunate to have you among us today, and thus, without further delay, would like to hear it from you.
Thanks a lot, Amate. First of all, a very good evening to everyone. And a big thank you to Swasth Wellbeing and Amatapal for inviting me to this event. It's an honor to be here. So the talk that I'm going to give today is about pharmacovigilance for patient safety. And at the outset, I would like you to see a video that I would just share now. Just give me a moment, I'll share that video. Are you able to see my screen, Amate?
Yes.
Okay. Could you also confirm if you're able to hear the audio of the video? Yes? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
We were told this could never happen again. But Alan, who's 8, has been terribly damaged by thalidomide, which his mother took by accident when she was pregnant. Such is the taboo about his injuries, his family don't want us to show his face. From the late 1950s, thalidomide was given to pregnant women for morning sickness. 10,000 babies were born with terrible injuries worldwide before it was withdrawn in 1962. But the truth is, thalidomide never really went away. In Brazil, it's been relicensed to treat leprosy. This factory produces 8 million pills a year.
I think if we inform people about the benefits that thalidomide can bring to patients, we can dispel the myths. The benefits outweigh the risks.
It is tightly controlled. Clear warnings on the packets. 2 forms of birth control for every woman who takes it, and regular pregnancy tests. These are just some of the forms that a woman has to fill out. But there's evidence the system isn't 100% effective. Researchers analysed 17 million births between 2005 and 2010. In areas where thalidomide was used most, they found a higher than average number of birth defects, a disturbing correlation.
So we found after the 6 years of research a strong correlation, a significant and positive correlation between the amount of thalidomide dispensed and the type of congenital defects.
No one's saying that thalidomide should be banned. It's far too important to medicine for that. But this is a deeply unequal society. It's the poor who suffer most from leprosy. And because of inadequate education and bad healthcare, it's likely to be the children of the poor who suffer most because of thalidomide. Children like Alan, who must live with the consequences of one small mistake made before he was even born. Angus Crawford, BBC News, Brazil.
Yeah, so the purpose of my sharing...
Many people will be surprised, maybe horrified, that thalidomide is still being made. And this factory is being...
Are you able to hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
thanks. Yeah, so the purpose of my showing this video was to help everybody who would be listening to this webinar understand the importance of pharmacovigilance. Thalidomide disaster is something that most of people in the pharmaceutical industry and in the pharmacovigilance industry know very well about. But the question here is that this thalidomide babies were recognized in 1950s, and it is 2021 at this 22 now at this moment, and thalidomide babies are still born, and that is what emphasizes the importance of pharmacovigilance and the power pharmacovigilance can have towards mitigating the risks that the medicines can have if they're communicated properly. So I'll now start with my presentation and share my presentation to take it further. Okay. Can you see my screen, Amrita?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, pharmacovigilance for patient safety. I'll again start with the thalidomide disaster for anyone who does not know what it was about. In 1950s, there was thalidomide was used as a mild sleeping pill and remedy for morning sickness in pregnant women. It was a simple a drug that was thought to be completely non-toxic because the animal studies that were done on it did not show a dose high enough to cause toxicity at that time. So it was Professor McBride, a very famous gynecologist, who saw the benefit of thalidomide in morning sickness for pregnant women, and he started dispensing it, and very soon the trend caught up all over the world. The trend caught up all over the world, and it became a very very common drug to be used for morning sickness in pregnant women. As this was happening in a few years, it used to be seen that children were being born with congenital abnormalities and deformities. And it was Professor McBride himself who recognized this, and he wrote journal papers on what he had seen in the pregnant women he was treating. And it was estimated that about 10,000 children were born worldwide with this deformity. As I showed you in the video, thalidomide babies are still born. We know about Brazil from this BBC UK video that I just showed you now. But I'm sure in the remote parts all over the world, there might be more thalidomide babies who are still born. So what did thalidomide disaster do? Thalidomide disaster actually laid the foundation of the present day pharmacovigilance. Just after the thalidomide disaster happened, WHO established its program for international drug monitoring. It actually jolted the whole healthcare system, and the need for pharmacovigilance or drug safety or monitoring of the side effects of drugs was understood. And now there are 134 countries and 38 associate members of the International Drug Monitoring Program. Collaborating center is Uppsala. And the purpose is to promote pharmacovigilance level at the country level throughout the world. So for anyone who doesn't know what an adverse drug reaction is, it is a response to a drug which is noxious and unintended, and which occurs at doses normally used for the prophylaxis, diagnosis, or therapy of disease, or for the modification of physiological function. In simple terms, it's a side effect. Now, a side effect or an adverse event could have a causality, as in it could be directly related to the drug, or it might not have a causality. And that is what happens when we report an adverse event. The pharmaceutical companies or the national authorities work towards analyzing and understanding whether the adverse event or the side effect has a causality or relationship to the drug. So some facts and figures here. Among adverse drug reactions or adverse events are top 10 causes of mortality. The cause of 2 to 7% hospital admissions in US and Europe. It occurs during 10 to 20% of hospitalizations, and expenditure is about greater than 135 billion US dollars. In India, we do not have the real numbers, but we have the extrapolated numbers. About 4 lakh deaths occur every year due to adverse drug reactions, and 720,000 adverse events happen, including medication errors. So what is pharmacovigilance? If we really look at the definition that WHO gives for pharmacovigilance, it's the pharmacological science relating to collection, detection, assessment, monitoring, prevention of adverse events with pharmaceutical products. So does that mean, when we are talking about the risks or the side effects, does that mean are medicines unsafe? So here it is very important to understand the purpose of pharmacovigilance is to define the risk-benefit profile of a drug. No drug is safe, no drug is without side effects, but what we need to see is if the benefits outweigh the risks. And if the benefits outweigh the risks, the drug needs to be, and because it helps patients, it needs to be on the market. Now, further, I would talk about there are a lot of factors that are there. It could be that a drug is contraindicated for a particular population. And so if we put that contraindication in the label, the drug can be easily given to other patients, and it will have its benefit and the risks will be mitigated. So just to speak about what we talked about, the definition of pharmacovigilance and how it is done. As I said, it is detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse drug reactions. What happens in each phase is something that I'm going to explain just now. So detection happens when the adverse events are reported from different sources. Now, this is the first and the foremost and the most important step. And the adverse events can be reported by the healthcare professionals, by consumers, by patients. It can be taken from the social media, from literature, that is the journals that are published on from different hospitals or different studies that happen, clinical studies. Once the reporting happens, generally it is a mandate in every country across the world to have a pharmacovigilance system for a market authorization holder or a pharmaceutical company. So they are mandated to collect the adverse drug reactions for their or adverse events for their medication. So once these reports are collected, there's processing of these case reports that happens at the pharmacovigilance centers. And these reports that are usually called individual case safety reports, they are submitted to the regulatory authority. That this is the reaction that happened with my drug, and this is submitted to the regulatory authority. And for the clinical studies that happen, narratives are written for the adverse drug reactions that or adverse events that have happened due to that particular drug. Then comes the understanding of it, or the assessment and understanding, where it is important that now we have these events from the drug. Are they really related to our drug or not? And this happens when the aggregate data review of the adverse events is done. There are periodic safety update reports written from all the data that is collected for that particular drug for a particular period, and from that, whatever trends are seen, or if there are any signals that are seen. Signal is something that an adverse event is suddenly seen with a particular drug, or there is an increase in its frequency or in its severity, and that becomes a signal. And then it's about signal management, how the signal is going to be mitigated. And according to that, the risk minimization activities are done. And the risk minimization activities could be update to the summary product characteristics, labeling of that drug, DHPCs or Dear Doctor letters that are sent to the healthcare professionals, signal alerts, or eventually if the drug doesn't justify the risks, that is the risks outweigh the benefits, then the drug is withdrawn from the market. So what is the scope of pharmacovigilance? So when we talk about adverse drug reactions, one is the adverse events or side effects or any noxious effects that are seen, but it's not just limited to that. These are, they're under the adverse events, there are medication errors, lack of efficacy. So lack of efficacy is when a drug is not showing any effect. Now, for a patient who is undergoing a life-threatening disease, a drug that has no effect is it's a life-threatening adverse event. It's considered as a life-threatening adverse event because it's not saving the patient. Then drug interactions. Many drugs can interact with each other to lower or supplement the action of the drug, and drug interactions that happens with the MAS drug should also be reported. Drug abuse or misuse. This is something that commonly happens with the benzodiazepines, that is the psychiatric drugs, and finally the counterfeit medications. And that's something that is related to lack of efficacy. If a drug is not working, is it a counterfeit medication or is it a product complaint? There's an issue with the batch. It is when these reports reach the MAH or the pharmaceutical company and the regulatory authorities, they're able to take some action. So the first, as I said, the first and foremost and the most important step is reporting. If the reporting doesn't happen, risk minimization or any action through pharmacovigilance cannot happen. So what are the factors that affect development of ADRs? And this is a very interesting slide, and I would, anybody who would like to read further on it, I would like to refer you to this link from a study in CBI. So there are various factors that affect development of ADRs. For example, age. Certain adverse events could occur only in the pediatric patients or are more prevalent in geriatric patients. Something that is seen, and it is something that we all have seen live at this point of time when COVID vaccines were rolled out. If that can help us understand the importance of age as a factor, is when with the Covishield or AstraZeneca vaccines, we've seen that in patients with age group less than 50, the events of thrombosis were more prevalent. Then is gender. So when we talk about gender, I'll give you an example of hypertension medications like ACE inhibitors. It has been seen that ACE inhibitors are, it's more common to see the adverse event of cough in females than males with ACE inhibitors or hypertension drugs. Then, of course, pregnancy. Pregnancy predisposes you to a lot of conditions, and the development of adverse drug reactions can be pronounced. Allergies. We all have our own constitution. So if a patient has allergies to a certain drug, then it should be reported. It's a very important factor in development of those factors. Body weight and fat distribution. It has been seen that obese patients can be more predisposed to certain adverse drug reactions. Ethnicity and race, that is genetics. There's a whole field of pharmacogenomics that is coming up where our genes or genomics can affect the developments of certain ADRs in certain patients. Alcohol, smoking can predispose you to certain, or especially I would say there are a lot of adverse interactions, drug interactions that occur because of concomitant use of alcohol. Then polypharmacy, again drug interactions, and this is something which is very common in geriatric patients who are suffering through many concomitant chronic conditions, and are receiving a lot of concomitant drugs at the same time. So it is very important that patients who are receiving polypharmacy are monitored for the adverse drug reactions that could happen. In drug dose, frequency, duration. For example, biophosphonates at bedtime may lead to esophagitis, and this is a labeled event. So this is an information that the physicians should be talking to about with their patients. Duration. So if we talk about duration, the long-term use of a drug. If we take an example of psychiatric drugs or benzodiazepines, it is seen that long-term use may cause withdrawal symptoms or rebound symptoms when a patient resumes the drug. So that again, comorbidities that I talked about earlier. So this is the factors that affect the development of ADRs. So why pharmacovigilance? First of all, pharmacovigilance is very, very, very important for patient safety. How? Let's see that. So when an event gets reported, the pharmaceutical company when a pharmaceutical company and the National Drug Regulatory Authority see a trend in the number of events or a particular event that is being reported, it raises a signal, and that signal alert causes them to monitor that event with that drug more carefully. And different measures, risk minimization measures, are unrolled for that. Because of which, if the signal is confirmed, as in that the adverse event is caused by, the causality is established, the adverse event is caused by this drug, then what risk minimization measures are needed so that the risk of these events to the patients is mitigated? Again, prevention of adverse drug reaction that comes from the risk minimization, management of adverse drug reactions. So if once we know that an adverse drug reaction is caused or may be caused by by a particular drug, then it's like an informed decision that a patient takes, and it is easier, and patients and HCPs are aware of it, and it is easier to manage that adverse drug reaction if it happens with that patient at a particular period of time. So just to give you an idea of what kind of risk minimization measures can be taken. So this is a slide that I've taken from EMA website. And so if there are safety concerns, as I talked about earlier, how to prevent or minimize them is through the risk minimization measures. What can be the risk minimization measures? Routine risk minimization could be legal status, as in the drug has been, or a vaccine has been authorized for use by FDA or by EMA or by the regulatory authority. But if the risks outweigh the benefits, then the legal status can be changed, or warnings can be issued for that particular drug, for that event, or the emerging risks. Then changes to the summary product characteristics, to the package leaflets that come in the package with the information on the different adverse drug reactions, dosing information, or contraindications about that drug. Then labeling of the drug can be changed. And what are the additional risk minimization? It is the educational programs that can be done by the healthcare by the healthcare facilities, by MAH, a pharmaceutical company, by the regulatory authorities, for patients and for healthcare professionals. And I would be taking an example about it just in a few minutes. Then control access programs, as in the patients are monitored or are enrolled into registries when they are taking a particular drug. Pregnancy prevention program. There are quite a few drugs which are contraindicated during pregnancy because they might cause cognitive problems or congenital abnormalities if they're taken during the pregnancy. So there are pregnancy prevention programs that can be rolled out. One example that I showed you already is thalidomide. And when thalidomide is prescribed, it's important that these pregnancy prevention measures are taken. So just to give you an understanding about how a patient leaflet or prescribing information looks like, and what all is there. So any recent major changes, indications and usage, dosage and administration, what are the contraindications for that drug, warnings and precautions, adverse drug reactions that are there, drug interaction and use in specific populations. Also patient counseling information, and that can be in different ways according to the drug that is being prescribed or administered. So so when we talk about risk minimization measures, so one and the most extreme set of the minimization measure is to ban that drug or to withdraw that drug from the market. So just to give you an example, there were about 344 drugs that were banned by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in very recently in 2018, I think. And these were drug combinations, and this I've just added a screenshot here. This is a link for these drugs if somebody wants to see. India also, our government is also rolling out a over-the-counters drug list very soon, and this is also very important so that drugs that are Schedule H are not prescribed over the counter and the patients are safe. So I would like to give you an example here about, and these examples I'm giving so that we can understand that how pharmacovigilance and reporting at the right time and the risk minimization can really help with mitigating the risks that a drug has. So from 1998 to 2000, these four drugs, terfenadine, mivefratril, estimizole and cisapride, they were removed from the US market or restricted in their use since their co-prescription with interacting drugs had resulted in deaths. So they were causing fatal events in patients because of certain interactions that were happening with the concomitant drugs that the patients were taking. Now each of this drug had value in the pharmaceutical marketplace and for patients. However, these continued to be prescribed in an unsafe manner. And this was after there were multiple warnings from the manufacturer and the FDA. Consequently, the risk associated with their continued widespread availability could not be justified. If you want to read further on this, you can read further on this link from FDA. So I would say, this is a very important example because one, this could not have happened if the interactions or these events were not reported. Second, in spite of warnings, multiple warnings by the manufacturer and FDA, they continued to be prescribed. And that emphasizes to us the importance of effective communication that really reaches the physicians and the patients. I'll be taking some more examples on this. So valproate, this is a drug that is used for epilepsy and bipolar disorder. Valproate is contraindicated in pregnancy and in patients with childbearing potential. However, as per an EU review in 2014, 2 in 5 babies exposed to valproate in the womb developed cognitive problems and congenital abnormalities. And you'll be surprised to understand or see that the scale of this issue and harm caused by this is bigger than thalidomide. So this is after there were already multiple warnings and communication to healthcare professionals and patients. And even today, 1 in 5 women taking valproate in EU are unaware of the risks of taking this medication during pregnancy. So in 2018, PRAC recommended new measures to avoid valproate exposure in pregnancy. There were there were a lot of measures that were taken. And if you would like to know more about it, you could go to the EMA website and go to this link. And one of the measures that was there was to label or to on the packaging of the drug mention that this drug is contraindicated in pregnancy. It can cause congenital abnormalities in patients, in children, if the mothers receive this drug. So this is something that, after reading about it, I wanted to know what is it that we are doing about it in India, because the example is from European Union. So I went to a pharmacy and I looked for valproate, and these were the 3 brands that I saw. Out of these 3 brands from different pharmaceutical companies, there was only one brand that had the warning about pregnancy. If you can see this, so there was warning about pregnant patients and babies. And in the other 2 packagings, I could not see any warnings there. So you can understand if this is an issue that is being faced in EU. It is high time that in India as well, our regulatory authority takes important, and the pharmaceutical companies take important steps to mitigate this issue and to do labeling changes wherever required. Then let me give you an example of, because as I said, medication errors are also part of adverse events. So let me give you an example of how medication error reporting can help in mitigating risks. So this is these examples I've taken from the EMA website. It was a presentation done by DIA, and the examples that are here are from the Medication Safety Unit, BfArM. BfArM is the regulatory authority for Germany. So what was the problem? So what was reported was that patients in an intensive care unit received Neprosol inject for hypertension, but there was no clinical effect, and the patients received other medicinal products for lowering the blood pressure. So now this also is a lack of efficacy, and let's see what had really happened. The healthcare professionals had used only the solution for injection, namely water for injection, because the pack included 2 kinds of ampules with the same product name, that is Neprosol inject. So so you can understand from this that it was a gross medication error, that the patient did not receive the drug at all. They were only given water for injection. So when these cases were reported to BfArM, let's see what solutions or actions were taken by BfArM to mitigate this issue. So the solution that they took was, after strong recommendations from authority, BfArM, the MAH changed the name of the ampules as follows. First, earlier it was called as Neprosol inject. So for the ampule with the powder with the drug, they changed the name to Neprosol inject, powder for solution for injection. And for the second ampule, which was just water, which was also called Neprosol inject earlier, they changed it to water for injection of Neprosol inject. Now you can understand with this labeling change and packaging change, it could really help in mitigating this risk, because now the HCPs had a clear indication which is the powder and which is the water. So from this example, I wanted to show this, that because these cases were reported and these was analyzed by the pharmaceutical companies and by the regulatory authority, these changes could happen, and the medication errors, more medication errors were saved because of this. Let's take the second example. Okay, I use the same example. So let's come to this very recent news report in our country, and that was cough syrup deaths that happened in a Delhi hospital because of children, 16 kids were given, a lot of kids were given the cough syrup in the hospital. There were 3 kids who were under the age of 4. They died because of this, and 16 kids fell ill and were hospitalized. And an official probe was set up to see if it was the dosage that was wrong or the or the bad batch. There were very quick actions that were taken. The doctors who were responsible were suspended for a period of time until the probe was done. And these actions were taken. That the batch was also withdrawn, and the drug was suspended for some time from the market. So if I was looking for the follow-up reports on this news piece, and I saw that the last news piece is only on 22nd December 2021, and there are no follow-up reports. So as a patient, I would say, or a healthcare professional who's looking to understand what really happened in this case, I have no resolution there. So this is something that I would say when it's also about incident reporting and learning. So here we see that the reporting was done and a probe was set, and I'm sure the probe is being done. It is important that the learnings, or the real issue with on why this happened in that hospital or with that drug is also revealed to the healthcare professionals, and dear doctor letters are sent so that these kind of medication errors do not happen again. Then again, let's talk about, it's not just about adverse events to drugs, it's also about adverse events following immunization. And in India, we have Pharmacovigilance Program of India, where I would like to share this with everyone. If you want to report the adverse event following immunization with the COVID vaccines or with any vaccines that a patient takes or a child takes, these are the places one can report. Is the mobile application. One can report through an ADR reporting form. It can be sent to the AMCs or the area monitoring centers under PVPI, or these can also be reported on the toll-free numbers. And it's very important that any AEFIs, especially with the COVID vaccines, are reported because the safety profiles of these vaccinations are still being established, and it is only if we report then the risk minimization measures can be taken to mitigate the risks. So here I would also like to share the screenshot from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website on that the AEFIs are being reported in our country, and there's this causality assessment that is being done by the AFI committee under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and these are shared on the website for anyone who would like to follow it. So I would also like to recommend here to any healthcare professionals to do this causality assessment course that WHO has released, and it is for AFI causality assessment, and it is a very, very effective e-learning where there are ample examples on how causality assessment for an AEFI is done at the regulatory authority levels or at the national level. And it is not only about the causality assessment at the national level or the healthcare level, it's also when any healthcare professional is administering a vaccination. If we understand, or if we are trained on the AFI causality assessment, it is easier to manage any adverse drug reactions or AFIs that happened during that time. So let's talk about what are the real challenges that are there to pharmacovigilance. First and foremost, that is a worldwide reason, is underreporting. And as I have been saying again and again, reporting is first and foremost. And until reporting happens, pharmacovigilance cannot happen. Then lack of effective communication about signals, adverse drug reaction and drug interactions to healthcare professionals and patients. And thirdly, it's the question, even if there is effective communication, for example, we saw in the examples earlier with Valproate and with the 4 drugs that were withdrawn. So as EU and FDA shares that communications and warnings were sent by FDA and EU and the pharmaceutical companies again and again. However, these events kept happening, So the question is, the information absorbed and used by clinicians and patients effectively or not? And I would like to, in my further slides, I would like to take up what could be the reasons on why the information might not be absorbed or used effectively by clinicians or patients. So let me take an example here. This is an example that I'm taking from active drug surveillance study that was conducted in APIK in a tertiary care hospital, and the study was published in APIK Journal of Internal Medicine. There was a case in a particular case in the study where when the adverse active surveillance of adverse events was taking place, and when the healthcare professionals were doing that, clinicians were doing that in the hospital. So they came across this case of abdominal pain in a patient that was the patient was going through for about 3 years, and it was managed with pantoprazole by the treating physicians that he had been going through. But when the physicians investigated the issue, they saw that the patient was receiving another drug, escitalopram, concomitantly through all these years, and it was probably the escitalopram-induced duodenitis that was causing the abdominal pain in the patient. Now, the patient was being managed for this event for quite a lot of years, and had this cause been established earlier, the patient would not have been prescribed any medication unnecessarily, and the issue would have resolved quite earlier. So when how they established this was because when they weaned the patient off escitalopram, his abdominal pain and his stomach symptoms, they improved and they resolved over time, and it was established that it was escitalopram-induced duodenitis. So this really helps us understand that it is very important that there is an understanding of adverse drug reactions and drug interactions, and it is used as an essential diagnostic tool in clinical practice, especially in patients with chronic condition and patients who are on multiple medications. So I would like to introduce this concept here, that if we could diagnose and prescribe through the lens of pharmacovigilance. When a patient goes to a healthcare professional, so before diagnosing, if there's also a lens of pharmacovigilance on, if there are any concomitant medications that this patient has already been taking, and if any of them could be the cause of the symptoms that the patient is presenting with. And if we are able to use the pharmacovigilance lens, so I feel, because this is only one of the examples, and there are ample examples that are there through, if we read the literature studies on, and if we talk to the healthcare professional, there are ample examples that are there in which the real cause or the root cause of the adverse event is not established, and the patient is unnecessarily given medications for years altogether. So again, if we try to understand, is the misdiagnosis of an adverse drug reaction as a new ailment by clinician, is it a human error, just a human error, or is it a lapse in the system? Do we need to tackle it through the systems approach? Because if we see with the magnitude of data on adverse drug reactions and drug interactions, is it really possible for clinicians to keep track of all AEs and interactions and be conversant with latest literature on a regular basis? And if we really go into depth of it, then I as a patient or as a pharmacovigilance professional, I can vouch for it that it's not that easy. So it's important that through systems approach, there are tools that can support clinicians, and there is pharmacovigilance expertise through which which supports clinicians and HCPs to identify these areas in time. From the technology perspective, there are drug interaction trackers like Epocrates and Miracle Letter that can be powerful aids for clinicians to see what kind of interactions can happen with a particular drug. They can do quick searches in databases like VigiAccess that can also inform a healthcare professional of emerging signals and can serve as a starting point in identifying similar events in their patients if they encounter any of the events. And also the literature searches or reading literature regularly can be an important aid. Then regular consults on medication and adverse event review by pharmacologists during hospital rounds can also help in the right diagnosis and catching the areas in time. Hands-on experience with pharmacovigilance data in area monitoring centers during internships and medical training could also assist future clinicians to appreciate the significance of pharmacovigilance in clinical assessment. So what is the need of the hour? So the need of the hour is that healthcare professionals are at the forefront for reporting AEs, because it is very important that the AEs are reported, and healthcare professionals is the best person because they have complete knowledge of medicine and of the disease areas. And if they take the lead in reporting AEs, then a lot of risks can be mitigated and healthcare can become safer. And for that to happen, it is important that there is blame-free and safe reporting culture. And that's a culture that is also, it's also something that patient safety implementation framework that was released by the government of India in 2018 is trying to establish in India now. And there are efforts on it through different stakeholders on establishing a blame-free and safe reporting culture. Then patient engagement. We have to move away from paternalistic approach towards patients. If patients are armed or they come with some knowledge, it's important that they are given the information about the risks, or the consent is taken from them if there are any complications that could happen due to the procedures or due to the drugs that they are taking, so that they take informed decisions and they are equal partners in their health or treatment plans. Then again, as I talked about this earlier, it's important that patients, there's a lot of importance of sharing patient stories. And because and this is a study done by EMA on what happens when patient stories are shared. So when patient stories are shared, there is an emotional connect. If we give you statistics about these are the number of adverse events that happen every year, or hospitalizations that happen every year in a country, versus if I give you story of one patient who experienced this, it has a lot of impact on a person or a healthcare professional who is listening to the story and take actions that can mitigate such risks in the future. And I would like to give you an example of how the healthcare professionals can also do reflective writing. And this is an initiative that was taken by Pharmacovigilance Program of India at CSDIMER Area Monitoring Center. And they released a reflective writing e-book where clinicians who had seen or who had encountered adverse drug reactions during their practice talk about them in a reflective manner and how they felt about it, what went into their mind, how it changed their approach towards adverse drug reactions. These are certain reflections. That, for example, the whole set of events of this incident was an eye-opener for me not to overlook any adverse reaction. And such kind of reflective writing and sharing of such reflective writing can create a lot of awareness and sensitivity towards pharmacovigilance and towards adverse drug reactions and the importance of reporting and monitoring adverse drug reactions. Then again, when we talk about patient engagement, it's important that patients also become responsible in ensuring the patient safety. These are few points that patients can keep in mind when they are when they go to an HCP, and I'd like to talk about them one by one. One is keep record of your medical history and allergies. Because as I talked about earlier, ADRs are, or any kind of adverse drug reaction, adverse events can be precipitated by particular conditions that a patient has or allergies that the patient has. If we do not have a record, and if we do not share our medical history and allergies with the doctor, it can cause more risks. Then it's important that we read patient leaflets on what is the dose and frequency of the drug I'm taking. It's about becoming one layer of safety there, where we, if we are aware, we can reduce the patient safety incidents. There's information in patient leaflets on adverse drug reactions, contraindications, and any other measures that need to be kept in mind when taking that particular medicine. Then be careful about the dosages. Do not discontinue medicine on your own. It is important to discuss it with your healthcare professional. Let your doctor know if you're concomitantly taking any herbal or Ayurvedic medications, because it's also important to understand it's a misconception or a myth that interactions cannot happen with herbal or Ayurvedic medication. It has been established, and the research has shown that, pharmacovigilance research has been showing that any kind of medication taken along with other medications can have interactions. Then keep a record of your previous adverse events. This is something that is very important, because if a patient has already experienced an adverse drug reaction with a particular drug, if you have a record of that, and if you inform your healthcare professional about it, then it can really mitigate the occurrence of that adverse drug reaction again. One knows about it, and the doctor can prescribe a different drug, a different brand, which does not cause similar adverse drug reaction. Then again, discuss your concomitant medications with your physicians to ensure that there are no interactions. Do not self-medicate, and this is very, very important. And from the perspective of antibiotic resistance as well, because it is known that 52% of Indians self-medicate. And one of the burgeoning problems in India and in the coming decade is antibiotic resistance. And I think antibiotics is one of the most it is most commonly misused sometimes, where patients, and I've heard it through, in my own circles sometimes, a patient becomes, or a friend is not well, and she would say, oh, I'll take a ciprofloxacin tablet and I'll be okay until the morning. She has cough or cold, and that's the solution they have. And anybody who understands antibiotic resistance, it is important that incomplete courses and self-medication is not done. Again, I want to emphasize that as patients, it is important that we report any medication error or adverse drug reaction to our HCPs or doctors and to the regulatory authority or the pharmaceutical company, because as I explained in my presentation just now, it is only through reporting that risk mitigation and pharmacovigilance can happen. Finally, I would just like to say that dying from a disease is sometimes unavoidable, but dying from a medicine is unacceptable. And pharmacovigilance and drug safety is the only way that we can mitigate it and prevent it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arshia, for taking the time and helping us understand what exactly is pharmacovigilance and why is it important. So, so with this, we have come to an end of today's session. Thank you for giving us your valuable time and enlightening us on our viewers with the knowledge and information about the topic. Also, I would like to thank all the participants and viewers for being part of this session. And finally, with the hope of having all on board again with us for more such informative sessions by the eminent experts. Thank you, Arshia, for coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mate. Thank you, Swasth Wellbeing, and everybody who listened to the talk. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah.